very, very happy to invite now Reverend Allyn to talk us about the Highlander Research and Education Center. And I was looking to the description of the work you make, and I was saying, me to myself, what a match, these two speakers, and this happened all the day. What a match, so much I would like to see the dialogue between you. So please present us the project, what you are doing. We are all ears, hearts, and hands. I hope so to be with you. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, really excited to be with you all today. I'm Allyn. You can just call me Allyn. I'm going to share my screen and walk you through a bit of a presentation so that folks can visualize what's going on at Highlander. And I think it was a really great segue to talk about intergenerational work and some of the things that I could highlight a lot of different stuff that we do at Highlander. But one of my most favorite things, and also the way that I myself got involved in Highlander's work over 15 years ago, was through youth education and intergenerational work. So I'm really excited to talk more about that tonight. And it will be a fast overview. And here we go. So just to give folks a little bit of a background on Highlander, we're based in a place called Newmarket, Tennessee, 186 acres, 19 buildings, a residential facility. We don't really consider ourselves a retreat center, but we do support people who need to be in retreat for whatever reason. We consider ourselves a school. We have meeting rooms in schools, and we're known a lot for the fact that we use rocking chairs as our furniture, and that's a long story. But we're in Newmarket, Tennessee since 1971. We were in Knoxville, Tennessee, just a little bit away from there for a decade. That's the place. It's no longer standing, but it was a home that we used for our office and programs. That guy standing there is one of the founders of Highlander, named Miles Horton. And we were in a community called Summerfield, Tennessee, which is outside of a small town, which is in between Nashville and Chattanooga, Tennessee. So I raised all that because we've always been in East Tennessee, the bigger area of East Tennessee, which is the more mountainous part of the state. And we've always most often been in rural communities, save for that 10 years in Knoxville. And you can also see that we're 90 years old this year. So we turned 90. We're really getting excited for our 90th anniversary weekend next weekend. Miles Horton is the most famous person associated with Highlander. I'll read this out loud. Probably the most important thing we do for people is to have them participate in an actual democratic experience, a ripe experience where people are free to talk and make decisions, where there is no discrimination, and where their experience is valued. If you do not value a person's experiences, you do not know how you can value them as a person. I think that's a really good point that Miles made, and really underscores a lot of our philosophy of education. Where we start is with people's experiences. We've been doing a lot of the same stuff since 1932. And I like to really emphasize that we owe our fame and a lot of the kind of our success to Black women, in particular, this woman on the left, that's Septima Clark, who was one of the world's foremost educators, in my opinion. And the woman on the right is Rosa Parks, who was one of her students. Back in the 50s, they were both part of our staff and program, and they served on our board of directors later. And we're real honored to be in their legacy. So what do we do? We're a school for grassroots leaders fighting for social change. We're kind of an unusual school where we have a lot of different students who, sometimes they can participate for just a weekend. Sometimes we're working with them for 5 years in a row. It just kind of depends on what is up and what we're trying to work on and what they're trying to work on, most importantly. We also see ourselves as a place where leaders of social movements can come together to learn and figure things out. And we really do this across power differences. So we really try to make sure that if someone's got a lot of social, economic, cultural power, it's not that we don't invite them to be one of our students or our participants. It's that we really make sure that they don't get to exercise the kind of power over another person who may not have as much social, economic, or cultural power. We're also just a place, right? We have a place and hospitality that we can offer people, and we do that a lot, especially in intense movement moments. Like in 2020, we were kind of functioned as an underground railroad for people to hide out during heightened security issues and attacks from the state, attacks from across the United States. Really, a lot of people hit out at Highlander. And ultimately, we're trying to train people in how to experience, practice, and build democracy. We use methodologies to do that. I'm going to talk about a couple today. Intergenerational organizing is one of them. We focus a lot on language justice as part of and central to our democratic practices. Intergenerational organizing, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Cultural organizing, which has a long tradition at Highlander, and you'll get a little bit of that a little bit later. Participatory action research. We didn't start participatory action research, but we have a lot of deep experience in it, particularly in Central Appalachia and the Southeast. And then popular education, which is people's education, or some people just call it adult education, but that word adult education has been misappropriated, I think. But a lot of what we do with our methodologies is design programs that are in anticipation of and in response to. So we look ahead, we try to think ahead about what our movements and the leaders of our movements need. And we also do it in response to what they need. So they come to us a lot of the time with needs. We try to address them with our educational work. We've always had youth and intergenerational programs. In fact, the founding members of the staff back in 1932 really came into an active experiment in Monteagle, Tennessee, where there were two women who were running a really alternative educational program that then became a part of Highlander. And that one of those programs was a children's school that lasted until the 50s. And then we had other youth programs, and we still have youth programs today. So we have children's schools then and now. We work a lot with youth movements that have been started by Black and brown and working class, cash poor, queer youth. One of the programs that we're known most for is Seeds of Fire. It's a year-round program where we have youth leaders who guide us in what they want to design and how they want to bring youth organizers from across the Southeast. So we work across Texas all the way up to Maryland, down into Florida, all throughout the US South and in the Mountain South. And that program, Seeds of Fire, is really kind of our core intergenerational youth program, where we really devote years and years of work with 13 to early 20-year-olds. And we have a lot of different ways that we work with them and different features of the program. But we also do fiscal sponsorship. We support youth-led organizations. One of them is called the Stay Project. It's for youth under 30 years old all throughout the Mountain South. So East Tennessee, Western North Carolina, Northeast Georgia, Southwest Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, and different parts of the Mountain South. Like if you're under 30 and you're part of that project, it means you're getting a lot of support from Highlander administratively, for fundraising, counsel, mentorship. There's another group called Power U based in Miami. Their long name is Power U, Center for Social Change. We're their fiscal sponsor as well, and they work with teenagers who are organizing around youth issues in Miami, particularly around schools, particularly around heavy policing of Black and brown schools, or predominantly Black and brown schools. And they also, we help them in the organizing work they do around fighting for more equitable educational budgets in their school system. We also do a lot of partnerships and collaborations with youth folks. So I think one of the reasons we're even here today is because of some of the work that we've been doing over the last few years with the Global Folk School Networks, the network that's really coming out of the folk high schools in Denmark, but also bringing folk high school educators and others together from around the world. And then we work a lot with colleges, K through 12 student and educators. Christopher and I just happened to be together last week in Amherst College, where we were running a youth program, or running a workshop and having a conversation with college students and community folks from Amherst College. And that was really cool. So we do a lot of different kind of stuff with youth. Central to our methodology, just thinking about methodological work, is this question of what we call just basically popular education. And in popular education, what we're trying to really talk about is a spiral, like a process, not so much something that is linear or how people learn. We don't believe that people learn in a linear way. But what we do first is we call people in. We bring people into the space. And then we really ground our first conversations with folks in experiences that people are bringing together. And then we work through the spiral, right? We look for patterns, we help people identify those patterns, and we do work where we add new information. So that's where we might bring in experts. We might bring in an academic who has a lot of knowledge. That's where we might, as staff, really add new historical information or context to a youth-led conversation. But we don't just stop there. We really help people go through the process of learning together to where they begin to practice up here in the upper right, practice skills, strategize, and plan. And then we get them to act. We actually accompany people in their social action, whatever work that they might be doing out in their communities. We accompany them in the field. We provide resources to them or get them connected to resources. And then we start over and we start the whole process over. So that's why we call it the popular education spiral. So that's a real rough introduction to our popular education model. Not something that Highlander started. It's just something we've modified over time with a lot of work with folks across the US and the world. Like I said, we really focus our work in the Southeast. So from Texas, people were talking about red states. I don't really believe in blue and red states. I believe in blue and red contexts. I think Washington is a really good example of that, where you have a little blue dot called Seattle and everything else is a right-wing and almost neo-fascist state. And not too different than what's going on in the Southeast. So just want to put that out there. But we do work in these big red, blocks here. And when I'm talking about some of our work, this is an example of some of our youth programming. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee is a group of young people that really found a home at Highlander in the 50s, particularly in the 60s. Youth camps, interracial youth camps that we brought young people together across segregation. We still do that kind of work today, right? We here are connecting Black and brown youth who are often pitted against each other in school systems or other kind of contexts. We help them talk to each other about what's going on in their school systems. So we're always trying to find people who wouldn't usually be talking to each other and help them do that, particularly to identify the issues and the bigger structural issues that are facing them and that they're up against, so that we can help them plan and work together in solidarity. We also do stuff where we're helping young people. This is a image here of a bit of an older fellowship called the Appalachian Transition Fellowship. It was a 4-year program. We've evolved it into something else, but this program was intended to support 20-somethings, 30-something-year-old young people who are going to be inheriting the Central Appalachia that is a post-coal Appalachia. And so what does it mean to really develop the leadership of a whole region that's been impacted similarly by a major economic and social and cultural paradigm known as extractive-based industries? So not too different than what's going on in Washington or Oregon with lumber or even fisheries or tourism or anywhere else in the US where there's some kind of extraction-based economy that takes out more than it puts back in. So we develop those kinds of programs. We help young people learn together about alternative economic and food systems. So a lot of field-based work. And then they also have project-based work that they do in community. Just some other examples of our children's programming. We have a young children's justice camp for ages 6 through 12. And the person in the middle who looks like the adult is our steward. Her name's Sherazar, and she works with youth who design the whole program. And then she kind of works out the liability issues and stuff. We also build intergenerational work into our governance of our own organization. So these two people are an example. Lone on the left and Margot on the right are folks who served on the board. Lone was 25 years old at the time, and Margot's 75 years old. So we build into our own organizational governance and intergenerational strategy. All of our workshops include intergenerational debriefing. So this is a workshop on solidarity economics, where we actually break people out based on their age cohort, and we help people, what do you need in order to participate? And they'll walk through, and we really spend a lot of intentional time doing that. And this is just another historical photo talking about intergenerational work. The Black man in the upper left-hand corner, that's the late Congressman John Lewis. The white guy here playing the guitar is Guy Carawan, one of Pete Seeger's close friends. And so this is from the 60s student movements that were bringing young people together to fight back against segregation. And then you'll recognize this guy. this is a youth program. This is like an example of our higher education accompaniment, where we had young people from a college in South Carolina who were fighting back against gentrification that their own college was doing in a neighborhood that's predominantly Black and very, very poor, economically poor. And so neighborhood residents and students wanted to come to Highlander to learn how they could work together to develop new policies. And we helped them do that. I think that's it, except just wanted to make sure y'all sign up for our homecoming. You can participate virtually. It's going to be next weekend. There's still time to sign up. So I just wanted to invite y'all to that. I can talk more about that during the questions, but that's the quick and dirty of what we do at Highlander with youth and intergenerational work. I'll stop there.
Wonderful. And the invitation at the end for us to remember we are going to have an app today, but there's more to do. Wonderful. Great, great, great work. And thank you for sharing. And in an open dialogue for all of our participants tonight, questions, reflections, please. We are together on this. Who would like to start? Thank you once again.
Yeah, so wonderful. I mean, Highlander has a really, big warm spot on my heart because I wrote The Nordic Secret and
Yeah.
read about Miles Horton and all of, how he took this inspiration from Denmark and created Highlander, and Rosa Parks has always also had there was also room for her in my heart. So great to finally meet you. I wondered how you said the stays at Highlander are from 2 weeks to years. How many people do you have staying there typically? I mean, how many people do you have room for? And
Yeah.
And how long is a typical stay? Because I mean, it's fundamentally different from the Danish folk high schools where people usually go for 4 or 5 months, and it's a sort of a semester structure, and everybody arrives at the same time and leaves at the same time. You seem to have more of a people stay as long as they need.
Yeah, that's exactly what you just said is exactly right. We've had folks stay at Highlander for months at a time to do maybe smaller gathering or maybe their own individual research, because we have a library and archives where people can come and dig into popular education curricula. So we sometimes will have academics working on a book, or we'll have folks doing, whatever kind of research. So I'd say, typically it's a 4 or 5 day consecutive process, but a lot of times it's 4 or 5 days, 4 times a year. You know what I mean? So they'll come in for these kind of cohort-based approaches where there'll be a year-long program, or maybe even a 2-year-long program, and they'll come for like 4 or 5 days at a time, or once every 3 or 4 months. But a lot of times we'll be with people out where they are too, right? So we'll go into residency with folks in their communities. It just kind of depends. Yeah. I mean, historically, we've done 2-month-long projects, right? So we had, in the 30s and 40s, when rates of unemployment were really high because of the Great Depression, we would have unemployed workers on site for 2 months at a time. And it just, so we've been open to that idea we would be totally down to do that if that's what people needed. Yeah.
So a core activity in the 30s was the reading program for people so that they could vote. And that's where Septima Clark and her, what was it, Bernice Johnson?
Bernice Robinson. Yeah.
I mean, do you have similar literacy programs today?
Yeah.
Because that was really basic.
Yeah, I mean, that was in the 50s, and then the 30s we had a lot more. We were more of a worker CIO kind of before there was an AFL-CIO. We were the CIO's like de facto training school. I think everything, I mean, again, I think there's not a program that's specifically around like literacy so that folks could read and write to pass a voting test. But I do think all the educational work that we do is around what do people not know that if they do know, they could build power, right? So at the time, it's like folks didn't have the capacity or the investments in their communities where they had high rates of literacy. That was an obstacle to building political power so that they could affect their lives, the political systems, so all of that. So the basic equation is what do they not know that they need to know in order to shift conditions for their own well-being and their community's well-being. So I think today, a lot of people don't know about civics. A lot of people don't know about political systems. The public schools in the United States have systematically dismantled civics education. Critical race theory is not the beginning of the target of the right wing or even neoliberal Democrats or whatever you want to call them. This systematic dismantling of basic democracy training in our public schools means that we're looking at generations of people, at least 2 to 3 decades worth of people who don't even know what the rights are of voters. So in some ways it's not too different than the 50s, except we might be having higher literacy rates, but our civics literacy is lower. So we have an economics and governance program that really looks at helping people understand economic and political systems in the United States and in their local contexts. So that spiral that I showed you, that's our popular education model adapted to our economics and governance framework. So we're helping people understand capitalism. We're helping people understand the conditions of empire. We're helping people understand local and national and international examples of people designing new economic ways and new governance models. So that's as clear an example as I can give you right now. Yeah. What's up, Jerry?
If I may. So strangely enough, a week or two ago, I went down a rabbit hole around Black Mountain College. And what happened around there, and it was just really fascinating. And I had heard about it. I then did another sort of deepening of what I knew there, and was fascinated. And there's a whole lot of interesting stuff that comes out of there.
Yeah.
And I had heard about Highlander, but mostly because of Rosa Parks and a little tiny story. I'm blown away by everything you just presented, just astonished. And this question is not meant as a critique of you or the college or the school, but why didn't I know all of this? Why was this not just like totally, why was this not in my head a long time ago? Because I'm way too old to be learning about you for the first time.
It's cool. I mean, I appreciate that. I was trying to start my own school when I was a school teacher in 2006. I was teaching school and it was like, I want to start a school for folks who want to create social change and all this kind of stuff. And people are like, there's this place called Highlander that's like about to be there. It's about to be 75 years old. You should go to their 75th anniversary. And that's how I first got the Highlander. I think there's a few factors. One, adult education circles, I think in the university level and sort of the bigger industry is kind of appropriated by, talk about consumers versus citizens. I mean, I think the big inertia around adult education across the United States, even in Canada and other parts of the world, depoliticized, completely cut out from underneath itself by politics and Reagan in the 80s. I mean, just like the whole thing, right? So what it means to be remembering, like membering, like really putting back together these traditions that were more popular. I think that's one thing. It's like it's been really what Highlander does and what a lot of movements do, I think has been systematically kind of kept away from like just kind of folks who are interested in this stuff. I think too, we're in the South, so there's a big stereotype that we've always just been backwards and not interesting or anything like that. But if you think about it, like the biggest grassroots movements in the United States or in this continent really are in the South and have been since enslaved people fought back against the planter economy. You know what I mean? So if we reframe the way that we think about stuff, our historical lineages really change in the way that we're conscious of it. There's a lot of really robust stuff, but there's a popular narrative that there's not a lot from here, even though we're 90 years old and been kicking ass for almost 100 years. So I think there's that. I think also Gosh, we played small. I mean, as an organization, I think as an organization, we've always tried to be behind the scenes. You know, I think that's a big piece of it too. We really want to center the people who are leaders, and really put them in the front of things. And then I also would say that we've been attacked as an organization more than once. In 1959, we were attacked. We used to be called the Highlander Folk School, the state of Tennessee, and all the, you know, a lot of people like worked together to attack us and like literally take our name away, took our original land away. We had to like move to a second place. The second place we were firebombed, and urban renewal like destroyed the house and the neighborhood that we were in. And today, I mean, just 3 years ago, we were attacked, you know, by Nazis. And so I think we've had to both balance between trying to stay a little underground, but also, you know, be a place where a lot of people can learn about and come together and find inspiration. So I think, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a good question, but I think it's a combination of those. Yeah.
A tiny follow-up. How do you put all the things that you hold in your collective heads out in the world so that they're easy to use, easy to pick up? How like where are the resources, and are they well organized? And
yeah, they're
you
getting
have
better.
more ambitions for that?
Yeah, we have we have a library and archives team that you can access the stuff that we do have on site, but we also have our library and archives in a lot of strategically located archives across the United States. So the Wisconsin State Historical Society has a lot of our early archives. Appalachian State University has a lot of our archives for work that we've done in the mountains in the Southeast, particularly around land related stuff and coal extraction, coal fights and different things. The University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill has a real amazing collection of our archives. And they just have the capacity to do the digitization of those things. So we'll point people in those directions if they want to learn more about that kind of stuff. You can also just go to our website, and like we have a lot of stuff you can download. And then we have books. And there's like we have a bookstore. So we sell books that people we like, right? And then we also have books about us, so you can read the books about us. I would recommend starting with Septima Clark's Ready from Within. It's a really good book, and
Cool.
that's probably, yeah, it's a good book.
Thank you.
Totally. Yeah.
So one let's call it curious experience that I have whenever I talk about the Nordic Secret, and I have Rosa Parks on the cover here. And I usually open my presentation with who are the three people here on the top. And even in Germany, they couldn't recognize Goethe and Schiller 2 weeks ago. But among Europeans, I very often and very quickly get somebody who recognizes Rosa Parks. And among, I would say, white Americans, not so much. Which I find interesting. So I think there is a chapter of American history that a certain group of Americans have not heard too much about. And another sort of funny difference between at least Denmark and the United States. So I went to a rather, I mean, Denmark is very liberal, but I went to a Christian private school, which was said to be a little bit conservative, and we sang the song about Joe Hill in our music lessons.
Yeah.
So I mean, I got a lot of a very sort of diverse input from American history, and when I meet white middle class Americans, I often have a wider frame of reference to this part of American history.
Yeah.
So Jerry wrote, you'd never heard about Septima Clark. I had not heard about Septima Clark either before. I mean, maybe I had, but I, you know, had a sort of vague resonance. But it was only when I started digging into to Highlander that I really encountered her. And I mean, I don't remember if it was her or Bernice Robinson who started teaching reading by reading the Sears catalog and the UN Human Rights Declaration in soup cans. I mean,
Yeah.
that kind of creativity and really meeting people where they are and asking them, so what is it you would like to know? And then, okay, let's start there. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things about the citizenship school program that Bernice and Septima, and the other name that I like to make sure people remember is Esau Jenkins, who is really the person who kind of conceptualized the program, even if he didn't implement it. He had a 6th grade education. He was at a workshop at Highlander in 1954, I think, where they were trying to experiment with getting people to engage with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights as like a tool to talk about social issues. And Esau said, "This is cool, but my folks don't know how to read. So what is the point of trying to talk about this?" And so that shifted the whole workshop toward, wait, yeah, that makes sense. And so in South Carolina, the primaries, if you couldn't vote in the primaries, you couldn't vote for who you wanted to. And nobody could vote that because it was a single party state at the time, and it still basically is. But I mean, I think that's a really good example. The other thing about Bernice is that she was a hairdresser, and they asked Bernice if she would take on the program. And if you know anything about, you know, like beauticians in the United States, Black beauticians in particular, you know that they run everything, right? They run everything in the communities. They both are independent business people, business women. So they have their own kind of separate economic vitality and abilities, but they also know everybody and everybody trusts them. And so she was like, I don't want to be a teacher. And then her cousin Septima like got her to do it, and she became this legendary educator. So I think there's just a lot about what it means. You know, when I was in Denmark back in May, I was talking to the folk schools there, and they asked me to say, like, what are my thoughts about the future of education in the global folk school movement? And I was like, we have to really reimagine what it means to be a teacher and educator, and teacher and a student. It's like, who can do it? It has to be like really fundamentally reimagined, but maybe not. Maybe we just kind of go back to some examples that have already happened and just like design our way back into those kinds of things, because I think it's really powerful. So thank you for bringing up that example. Yeah.
I mean, because today some of that reading soup cans must be, digital literacy.
Yeah, totally.
And understanding the internet and understanding algorithms and social media. And the question
Right.
is who can teach that,
That's right.
Who can open the door to that world. And I mean,
Yeah.
we also have the technology that can do it for us. I mean, somebody has to develop that. But that takes skills, and it's an education.
Yeah, I mean, our own version of that is, Highlander didn't really have internet access on our own campus until 2018. And that was because rural broadband did not exist in our context, even though we were 30 minutes away from a relatively large city in the US South. So we built our own. We built a tower. We worked with a local company to do line of sight internet relay from 30 miles away, relayed it to our tower. It relays down to the buildings, and then it also provides internet to anybody who wants to purchase it from that company off of our tower. And it means that people now can access their health care stuff, their homework, their ability to like just get some basic benefits and do some research. And that was before the pandemic. And I think it's really, really true that what do people not know? That if they knew they could build power, I think that internet and digital literacy stuff is super key, because it's been so removed from our public consciousness, and the influence that digital information has on our ability to even imagine, talk about the divisions, right? It's like, what is true? It's like, what is even true anymore? And if you don't even have the infrastructure to provide like some basic stuff, you can't, it's just ridiculous. So I agree, full on with that. Check out Southern Connected Communities Project. That's a really cool group that's doing a lot of experimenting, and they're very youth-led in East Tennessee around providing these kind of localized, democratized internet provision in rural contexts. And they work with a whole national network of people who are basically saying, if we don't run our own infrastructure and we don't democratize our infrastructure, what's the point? And so they're working with cool folks up in Detroit who are doing the same stuff in an urban setting. It's just a really neat project. Yeah.
Alan, it's so great to hear this coming through you and all that Highlander continues to do.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I am in a previous life, I worked for Acorn and
Sweet.
taught comparative ethnic studies, and so there's been a rich influence in some of those organizing approaches and pedagogies that have come from conversations and praxis that comes from Highlander. So it's just good to get to touch into that through your work.
Yeah, it's really nice to be connected, and the folks at Whitby are really, really. I met a few of them at the Fetzer Institute a few years back. So it was, their names are escaping me because I just had a kid a few years ago, so my brain is completely erased before 2019. But say hello to the folks for us there. Yeah. Any other questions?
How about, I mean, Pete Seeger played a huge role in Highlander. Do you have a music core today as well?
Yeah, a lot of our music. I mean, when I talked about our methodologies, it's not really fair to break, like, say we do one thing, two things. We all of us do all of those things in all of our work, right? Some of us focus on more of them than others. I bring a lot of song into my workshops. We typically are singing and performing, not performing, we're singing and doing a lot of group sing together in staff meetings all the way to board meetings and gatherings and educational stuff. So we'll teach folks songs that are part of the social movements or part of the communities that we're from, and we'll invite people to teach each other songs, which I think really is what has always been a part of our cultural strategy and our cultural program. I think today a lot of our cultural organizing program that's run by someone named Janae Taylor, and then before her a person named Tafara Waller Muhammad, who was on staff now in a different capacity with our participatory action research work, but the two of them have different connections and different ways that they involve and include music into their strategies. And then we work with a lot of musicians. So we work with a lot of musicians, not only in their role of like being friends to us and like coming in and wanting to get connected to the political and social movements that they find inspiring and that they want to be a part of, but also because they recognize their role. And so we'll be in accompaniment with them as folks who could influence a lot of people. So we have a really strong relationship with the Marigold Project, which is based out of Colorado. And that's a nonprofit started by an up and coming and pretty popular musician named Nathaniel Rateliff and his band, the Night Sweats. They're a really cool band. And then this coming homecoming, we will be having a big community sing and community music project with Toshi Regan, who's the daughter of Bernice Johnson Regan, who was one of the original SNCC freedom singers and founders of Sweet Honey in the Rock, which is a kind of a legendary Black women-led and Black women music group. So yeah, we do a lot. It's kind of hard to put it all into a few sentences, but music is still really core to our work.
If you were to say from a pedagogical or philosophical angle, what is it that singing and music does for people or for Highlander at Highlander? What would that be?
I think it helps people find joy. I think it also helps people animate together. So when, it was Bernice Johnson Regan who often said, if you can't sing together, you won't get free together. I think that's really, really true. It's also about kind of embedding the narrative, the collective narrative, and also adding new pieces, right? So a lot of times we'll change songs and we'll add new verses. So it's about kind of telling the story in a way that people can remember and carry out with them. But I think ultimately it's about helping people find joy and meaning and building power together.